Buckle up, brace yourselves, maybe gird some emotional loins because we're about to reopen some old wounds, relive past traumas, maybe do some wailing and gnashing of teeth, because today we are going to tier rank some of the most impactful, memorable second lead syndromes in K-drama, and that translates into the most painful and emotionally damaging. So first of all, let's define second lead syndrome, which is what happens when a drama sets up some kind of romantic rivalry, whether it's a love triangle, love rectangle, love hectagon, any number of sides are possible. And they set up the alternative romantic option so well that it divides our fan loyalties. And it also engenders in the fandom this sense of deep and debilitating secondhand pain because we know that his love is going to go unfulfilled. So second lead syndrome is more of a fandom term, but I think it's taken on widespread recognition because we all kind of understand this universal pain of either being on the unrequited end of this love that it cannot be, or pulling for a character who is the underdog. And also because we, by this point, recognize the patterns in the storytelling, we're feeling this anticipatory pain. So even when the second lead isn't there yet, we're like, uh-oh, it's gonna hit. And then the pain when he's feeling the pain, and then like the lingering after effects of the pain. So it's just like a whole spectrum of pain. Why do dramas do this if it hurts so much? And kind of as a corollary, why do we put up with it if it hurts so much? And I think there are a few reasons for this. I think they do fulfill a narrative purpose, and there is some kind of deep satisfaction that comes with it, pain notwithstanding, which is why even when it hurts, we're still gripped by it. We still come back for it. He's the foil to the imperfect hero, and often he's the really perfect guy. He's the nice guy. Maybe he's the one giving the female lead the attention and the care that she deserves when the hero is being an ass. I do think there is an ultimate sort of argument that who you should fall for never beats out who you do fall for. If you gave up Mr. Perfect for this imperfect other guy, then it's gotta be true love. So with that said, I have the tiers all set up here. And to go over some like baseline rules or sort of judging criteria, I picked out really the most impactful, the most memorable cases of second lead syndrome. And that means, of course, a lot didn't make the cut. I think there were maybe more than half probably didn't make the cut, but I kept in the ones that I think we'd really remember specifically for the second lead syndrome, or where there was just a really strong swell of support for them. Let's go over some of these tierings. Over at the top, I have the maximum emotional damage tier, the I'll never recover. This hurt me then, it hurts me now to think about it, it will hurt me forever. And the next tier down is major trauma, but I've healed. This one means it hurt at the time, but I've had some time and distance. I don't necessarily feel like it's the greatest injustice in the world, but there's something about it that just kind of like leaves a pang in my heart. The next tier down is it hurt, but I respect the OTP. And that one I'm gonna say is, I understand the story logic, and so I'm fine with where the story ended up, but man, I felt bad for that guy. And then the next tier is too cute to break me, which is, you know, like, oh, I'm sorry for him, but he was so cute, or it was so lightly treated. He's gonna be fine. My pain is minimal. And then the last one is, was this even a love triangle? Or was he just a guy standing over there with feelings? In the context of second lead syndrome, this is a case where he really was presented as a second lead. I am not including characters who just had one-sided crushes. To be in this category, it means that you were presented as a viable like second lead. There was maybe some hint of a shot that you had at winning her over, but it was so slight that for whatever reason it didn't really affect us at all. In my head, I have sort of this like mental map of where second lead syndrome hits for me in terms of emotional damage. And so I really think of it as an axis of story logic and acting performance. And I think acting performance is pretty obvious. Like if the character is acted really well and with a lot of just emotional investment, and that actor had so much charisma, then that can hurt a lot. Even if the story isn't necessarily doing it for us, if the actor really like takes it to a new place, then that can really dial up the hurt. Also on the story front, I think if you think about like the acting on kind of like an x-axis, and then this story logic on the y-axis. So if you have like story logic that is really, really strong and tight, and it sets up the second lead as a really valid option, or there's maybe some kind of like thematic or symbolic, you know, reason for him to be in the story, and then he's like a really good foil to the, you know, main hero, and conceptually it's just really logic and airtight. That can really do a number on us because we understand why he's there. We understand why he didn't get the girl, because the story really playing that out in a really meaningful way. It just, like he didn't get the girl. Or the story can really fail us and just do us doom dirty. And in that case, it just kind of doesn't really do anything for us. So with that said, we're gonna do Kim Woo-bin and Heirs. The Heirs, or I think the Inheritors, is another translation for the title. So in this one you have the character Kim Yong-do, played by Kim Woo-bin, and he's opposite the main lead, played by Lee Min-ho, and they're vying for the affection of Park Shin-hye. So, okay, if I'm gonna plot him on this rubric, I think acting is why this character is iconic. He's absolutely iconic as a second lead. Story-wise, I don't know. Like, Yong-do, to me, I never really bought him as a viable option. Like, I don't think that Park Shin-hye's character ever really saw him in that way, and so I'm gonna say he's low on the acting logic, or low on the story logic, and extremely high on the acting performance. I don't think this one necessarily hurts that much because he's charming. Like, the charisma of Kim Woo-bin made everything work. But okay, so the guy is like the kind of guy who has to antagonize the girl he likes to get a rise out of her. But he takes it to an extreme. So, you know, you have like the classic school room, like pulling on a girl's pigtails and like calling her names to make her look at you. But Yong-do takes it like 10 steps too far. So one of the early scenes, you know, she's walking by at school and he literally trips her and then like grabs her before she falls on her face. And she's like, "Why would you trip me and then grab me?" And then his very like smirky response is, "Well, how could I grab you if I didn't trip you?" Which is exactly the character logic of this guy. Like, he doesn't do anything the like normal way. I mean, I think of course the character is shown to have deep emotional scars and, you know, family pain, and he's just acting out because he doesn't have any love, etc. But I'm also like, you're almost a grown person and you should know better, and you're kind of a menace to society. But because it's so compelling and they do sort of like tease out some of that inner pain, I think, you know, I'm gonna say Yong-do goes, it hurt, but I respect the OTP. I think some people might put it up in the one above, major trauma, but I've healed. And I think where you land might be how strongly you felt for the OTP, because if you were not on Team Lee Min-ho, and there were a lot of people who were not because that character was a little bland, then you're probably on Kim Woo-bin's side, in which case maybe it hurt more when he didn't get the girl. And I think that might be a little bit of the writing kind of doing him wrong, or maybe doing Lee Min-ho wrong by not giving him a more compelling like main lead energy there, because it's like Kim Woo-bin had main character energy but not main character trajectory. Okay. So next we have You're Beautiful, and that is Yong-hwa playing Shin-woo-hyung. He was going up against Jang-wook. And again, I didn't realize Park Shin-hye is the love interest at the center. So this one is kind of a puppy love version of second lead syndrome. So I remember there was a huge sort of swell of support for Shin-woo, but I don't know if it hurt quite a whole lot, because I think we all understood that Jang-wook was for sure the main lead, and the OTP was strong and cute, and I don't think that her attention was ever swayed from Jang-wook's character. So I don't know that Shin-woo ever really had a shot, but he was the kind who was always there for her, and when the main lead made her cry, Shin-woo was the one who was always there to lend his support. So he's the good guy with no flaws who respects her decision to be with the other guy. And I think because he's actually friends with the lead as well, he never took it too far into that place of like strong jealousy or manipulation, or he never took it to the place that it would endanger the friendship. I think he probably lands I am tempted to put him into Too Cute to Break Me, but I think he might have had some more emotional resonance than that. So I think I'm gonna put him into It Hurt, but I Respect the OTP. I'm also trying to take a look at this as like not my own personal pain, but sort of like all of our pain as well. So sometimes I might feel a little bit strongly or less strongly, but I'm also trying to remember like our collective hurt. Okay, the next one is True Beauty. This one is pretty easy for me because I found Hwang In-yup playing Han Seo-jun to be absolutely adorable. This is on the pain scale or that chart. I think it's far into that, you know, actor charisma territory, like medium on the story logic, medium low, because I mean, they're in high school and this is very light drama, and I don't think that he ever had a true shot either, because the main two only had eyes for each other. And in the beginning, he doesn't even like her. He kind of only flirts with her as a way to get at the main character, Cha Eun-woo's character, Suho. And I actually think that in this case, in this drama, the bromance, the broken bromance between the two, they were former best friends, and then when their third best friend dies, it tears them apart. And that is much more meaningful as a relationship arc for them. And so spends the first part of the drama, the boys are kind of like at odds with each other because they have that lingering sort of blame and guilt over their friend. And then he kind of like spends a lot of time needling Cha Eun-woo's character. When he starts flirting with Moon Ga-young, it's really just, he doesn't really mean it. And so when he starts to like her too, he's late on the uptake. And so I don't really think that, you know, he felt absolute crushing defeat either. And so for that reason, I think it was very sweet. You know, he was just such an adorable character, and his performance is very, like, you know, it was the kind of young, rebellious teenager trying to act hard, but being kind of a dork about it. And that was so charming. So I have very fond memories of Hwang In-yup and True Beauty, and it didn't hurt. So I think it was Too Cute to Break Me. Okay, so Cheese in the Trap. This one is Kang-joon going up against Hae-jin. Kang-joon plays Baek In-oh, and Kim-gon is the woman in between, and they're in college. And this one's actually a lot similar to True Beauty, but like the angstier version. So this is similar, where the two boys used to be good friends, and there was some kind of rift and that tore them apart. They've been apart for a while, and then In-oh comes back, and when they see each other again, it's just bad vibes all over. And I think In-oh, he's like the rebellious sort of slacker who kind of gave up on his dreams because of his past, for which he blames his former best friend. And then he meets Seol, and so I think there's a little bit of that element of wanting to stick it to his old friend. But also, he and Seol, they get along, and I think she sees him, like she sees his potential, and she doesn't treat him like he's a total, you know, screw up. He's kind of like surprised by the way she treats him, which is maybe like with respect. And I think he develops this kind of like almost like reluctant attachment to her, because he's a guy he's in pain, and he expresses his pain through violence, that he is hard pressed to admit it. Where this drama really hurts is, I think, the writing / directing, because this is one on that axis where the story did us wrong. So the acting, I think, you know, was effective enough, but where it really like twisted that knife is the story buildup. There was a period toward the end of the drama where In-oh was getting so much screen time, and I wonder if that was just one of those things where like he was kind of popping. His character was resonating, and his performance was doing good things, and I think it just brought like some kind of energy to the drama that they just gave him more screen time than maybe he should have had, I think, based on the actual story, because we know what the story is. There was a webtoon, like we know who the end game is, and it almost started feeling like they were setting us up to thwart that and give him too much attention, and they were starting to sideline Park Hae-jin's character, which felt just wrong, because they were doing it without narrative explanation, and why are we spending much more screen time on the second lead and not giving the lead screen time? And so I remember that there was actually just a lot of online furor about it. It became a whole scandal. It became a whole controversy, and I think everybody left the drama kind of confused. And even the people who weren't necessarily on team second lead were like, okay, that was kind of confusing. So I have lingering memories of pain, but this one wasn't necessarily because the character made me feel like he should have gotten the girl. It's just that the drama was kind of like steering us in that direction, and we were like, this feels not right. Why would you do that? We're supposed to want it for him, but not actually give it to him, because that is the rule of second lead syndrome. So for that reason, I'm gonna say, I don't know, is this like major trauma, but I've healed? I think the trauma is a little bit more meta. It's more about how they handled it than what was on the page, but I do remember this being fairly traumatic. All right, next is Moon Lover's Scarlet Heart. This one is Kang-joon, and he plays the 8th prince, who is going up against, romantically, well, also in all other ways, his brother, the 4th prince, played by Jung-gi, and caught between them is IU. So this drama was pretty epic in the whole romance polygon, sort of, because there were, on paper, I think 14 princes. We didn't see all of them. I think they picked out certain ones to focus on. I think the story actually did a good job with this one. And the acting, I love Kang-joon, and Kang-joon is a very strong actor. So I think he played the character well. I think what took a turn is that the character goes from this very loving, gentle, tender, supportive kind of person, and then he turns halfway through, and I think that is the story, turning him into this like cold and calculating, the kind of person who actually does turn his back on people if he deems it not worthwhile. Earlier in the story, he and IU have like this very pure sort of romantic love line where they do have feelings for each other. They were planning on perhaps running away, getting married. And so for him to forsake that, so what happens is Lee-jung-gi's character is the outcast, and he's like a wounded wolf kind of character, and he attaches himself to IU because she is the first person to treat him like he's human, and he is absolutely love-starved, but like so intense about it that, you know, he's definitely not able to approach it in a healthy way. But the interesting contrast is that Lee-jung-gi's character as the main couple, he is single-minded in his devotion to her, and he never questions his feelings or that he wants that to be his future. We just don't know how he's going to get there, but he's just like, I'm going to make it happen. And of course, she is the one who is like filled with a lot more doubt because there's so many things standing in their way. And also she's kind of scared of him because she's from the future and she knows that he turns into a person with a very scary sort of history. And when she and Kang-joon are together, it's very sweet, and it's very like, he's her safe haven in this chaos that she's found herself into. But at the turning point is when, you know, I think her pity for Lee-jung-gi starts to turn, right? Like at first she just feels bad for him and she's scared of actually getting attached to him because she doesn't know what that means. But then when that starts to intensify, the brothers are now at odds to become like they're vying for the throne. And I think in the end, Kang-joon chooses his political ambition and also his own family over her. And so he's sort of like, I love you, just, you know, like, you're not like the only thing I love. Isn't that good enough? And it isn't, right? So I think in that sense, it's not the highest level of hurt for me because he made his choice. And if you make your choice and your choice is to walk away from her or to not commit to it in that way, then I'm like, it's okay. Like then I don't feel as bad for you. Sometimes I think second lead syndrome tells us that love isn't enough. Most of the time it's that the second lead love alone is not enough to compensate for the whole relationship, like if it's not reciprocated. And in this case, I think the second lead's love wasn't enough for even himself. So with that said, I am putting you, it hurt but I respect, because I don't think it was enough to give me trauma. Boys Over Flowers. All right, so this one is, maybe we've had enough distance to it to be away from the pain. I know that this was very painful for like maybe half of the fandom because this is a pretty even split. So Kim Hyun-joong is playing the second lead, and Ji-hoo, who is best friends with our main lead, played by Lee Min-ho, or Koo Jun-pyo, and they are vying for the affections of Chandi, or played by Koo Hae-sun. I think this one's famous for having the second lead and the woman be like famously, they call themselves each other's soulmates, and yet they're not the romantic pairing. And they keep saying like they're platonic soulmates. And it's an interesting approach because I sort of understand intellectually what they're doing, but I don't know if it really hit there for me. They're friends and almost like, you know, intellectual partners because they respect each other, they understand each other, and they both have like, well, when they're together, they have gentle energy. I was gonna laugh because she doesn't necessarily have gentle energy, but she does when she's with Ji-hoo. And in contrast, when she and the lead, you know, are just like at each other's throats, it's like sparks are flying in sometimes bad ways because they're always at each other's throats. Also, she starts out the drama with a crush on Ji-hoo, not Koo Jun-pyo. There was a window where he could have won her affections. It's just at that time he didn't want them, right? He was getting over his own first love and he saw her more just kind of as like, I think a sympathetic character. By the time that he realizes that maybe he is starting to feel something for her more, she is deep in it with Koo Jun-pyo. So I think the window is closed and he recognizes that. And what the drama does well, I want to say, is that they play with that, right? He doesn't necessarily intrude trying to steal the girl away because I think he respects their relationship, he respects her feelings. You know, there were definitely parts where they're playing a fake couple, but he doesn't overstep that bound. I think he respects the boundary there. A lot of his development as a character was internalized. It wasn't necessarily expressed. He wasn't like, you didn't see him crying about it, brooding about it a lot. I think a lot of it was just kind of very quietly, just he kept it to himself. And so the pain, I think, might have been on our behalf for him, like we felt it for him more than he was showing it himself. So I think I'm gonna put Boys Over Flowers. Okay, personally, I might be in the middle category, but I feel like for a lot of people, it's major trauma. I'm debating here, and I'm gonna put it in major trauma because I understand the pain. Structurally, it was set up in a way that I think maximized that divide between the two camps. Lovely Runner. All right, I think this one's really sweet. So this one you have Song-jae playing Kim Tae-sung, and he's going up against Hyun-sik or Seon-jae and vying for the affections of Kim Hae-in, who plays Im-sol. Okay, so I think Lovely Runner is similar to True Beauty for me, where the main couple only has eyes for each other ever, like through not only one lifetime but multiple timelines. I don't think that he ever had a shot, and it's very cute, and even the pain on his side is not super acute. This is one where the main leads are so strong that it carries the whole drama for me, probably for most people too, because they were just like, that was a perfect couple. Like they were not only endearing and sweet, but like heart-wrenching too. I think Taesung is there kind of as a foil. It's almost like he's there to spur Seon-jae to step up and do something about it and like, you know, actually give him a little competition in a very cute way, more than he is to actually be kind of a spoiler in that relationship. And I actually really love the timeline where they don't even date, or like he's not even like a contender and they're just best friends. I think he makes a good third friend to them, much more than he does as like a romantic rival. So I'm gonna say that Kim Tae-sung, you go into Too Cute to Break Me, because I think it's more than, was it even a love triangle? I think there was definitely a love triangle going on. He made Seon-jae sweat a couple of times, so he did his job. Moving on, we have Reply 1997. Okay, This one I almost didn't include, but I figured, I'm going to talk about the other ones. So you kind of have to start with 1997 because it was the first of the Reply series. It was the first one to be made. And I think it set this concept of the Who's the Husband game. So I wanted to include it. So in Reply 1997, you had Jong-ho playing Oppa. And he's basically the older brother to the main character, Seon-ho, who is quietly in love with Jung-gi basically for as long as we know. As far as we can tell. And we really only introduced Oppa, like the older brother, as a contender-ish. I think it was almost just as a coy sort of like, what if the story went a different way? Because he is like the gentle, kind, caring older brother figure. They have a different relationship, he and Jung-gi, because she respects him, like she's not fighting with him all the time. And I think they started playing with this device of what if we just sort of tease that maybe Seon-ho isn't endgame. And because Reply 1997 was sort of formatted like not like a typical rom-com, not like a typical K-drama, but in like this realistic slice of life sort of way, we weren't actually sure as an audience, like, oh, maybe it's not going to be the typical expected ending. So we were willing to kind of just see where they took us. So I think they were like playing with this thing of like, what if we have a Who's the Husband game where we tease that of course she marries somebody in the future, but we don't give away who it is, and we just like seed hints throughout the show, and by the time we get to the ending, that will reveal who the eventual husband is. I think in this drama, it wasn't really that much of a question. I think there was a few episodes where we might have been like, oh, interesting, maybe they're gonna surprise us. But by the very last episode, it was sort of like, oh, you're cute. You're still playing the game with us. Like, oh, okay. You saw the trick through the end. And I think for that reason, I'm gonna say this one actually goes into the was this even a love triangle, because that's the first one where we're like, I'm not actually sure. I don't know if that counts. But that's just the precursor to the next one, which is Reply 1994, which was also chronologically like the second series to be made, even though of course the years are off. So 1994 being the one that really dialed this up, and it was like they were just playing with us in 1997, but 1994 was the real game. Okay, I'm gonna need a minute to like bracing myself. Okay, so this one was Yoo Yeon-seok playing the second lead. Character name is Chilbongi, and he was going up against Trash Oppa, played by Jong-ho. And I mean, it sounds really weird to say Trash Oppa in this day and age. I'll just call him Oppa, because that was his nickname in the show, that they would not reveal to us because they were so intent on obscuring the whole Who's the Husband quandary in this drama that from the start they would not give us these characters' real names so that they could just play around even more with the confusion. So I think that 1994 was a writer at the top of her craft just messing with us. And like, I think she had in her mind this intellectual kind of challenge of how can I take this Who's the Husband game and really dial it up and make it actually an actual mystery, because as I said, in 1997 it was just kind of a cute side quest, not really much of a mystery. And I think she really committed to it, and committed to it to the extent that she flexed all of her narrative muscles with actual misdirects and planting seeds, some of which were red herrings and some of which were real. And so I will say, okay, if you are watching 1994 now with the benefit of hindsight and you know who the end game is, you're gonna be like, yeah, that's pretty obvious. But at the time, the experience of watching the show meant that we were expecting to be messed with. We knew that some of the stuff was going to be just like chum in the water. Like, I knew that it was just gonna be bait, and some of this was going to be actual payoff, and we couldn't tell what was what. And because the writer and the director, they were so good at their craft that they really learned to hide their sort of tricks so that you weren't sure which one was a trick. And I think the experience of this was also hard because the fandom became so divided. like the fandom turned on itself, and I hate to see that. I think that really made it hard as a fan to keep going, because no matter who you were rooting for, we weren't in it together. We were not all feeling the same pain. And so it's hard enough when you're feeling it internally, but when you have people from within the own family kind of like trying to pick at your wounds, it doesn't help things. So as a result of this, we weren't able to enjoy this drama unfolding kind of in like an organic way, because we knew that we were being messed with. And there's a difference between something that just sort of unfolds and you accept it as it comes along, and something where you're like, you start to get suspicious and paranoid about like, oh, is that a trap? It's meant to be ambiguous. And so like everything was written so that you could interpret it in multiple ways. And it brought out some kind of like ugly feelings in fans who are like, oh my God, if you are on this ship, then you are clearly deluded. And if you're on this ship, then you're stupid and your mom sucks. Like, it was so personal at this point. Again, like I said, in retrospect, once I know who the end game is, and like we get to a certain point in the story where things start to be revealed, you understand where the feelings are, and you're like, okay, got it. I'm totally on board with this. I think the problem was that Chul-bong was set up to be our misdirect character. So like in the earlier parts of the drama, he's actually given a lot of screen time, and he's given some of those like conventional K-drama lead moments and the setup. You see him falling for Kawada's character, Na-jung. You see him just kind of notice her and start to like her and keep looking over at her and just become aware of her while she's oblivious. It's not too far-fetched to be like, oh, this guy has a crush, he's so cute, he's being set up to be a romantic lead, and oppa is not even being played up like as a potential contender here. And so when the story starts to turn and oppa starts to take more presence in the story, then you see that, oh, that might actually be a viable option. But I think that this was a love triangle made more by the setup of the show than by actual like feelings, because once you step back and you see how it all plays out, and once you actually get access to Na-jung's feelings later, once she's in love with oppa, you're like, okay, well, that's it, end game. And the only question is if oppa is going to accept this, because oppa has his own sort of hang-ups about the relationship. He's fighting his own feelings about it, and you don't actually see how he feels for quite a long time, and he's very guarded. And so in the time that he's trying to figure out if he's going to reciprocate her feelings or if he's going to let himself kind of give in to his feelings, then Chul-bong is over here like making a case for himself, and he is, trying to court her and expressing himself and all of that. And so I think the love triangle felt like it was more viable than it was. But you don't have the benefit of hindsight to know that, because the writer is messing with us, and she is absolutely playing this up in a structural way. And so that's why on my chart, Chul-bong kind of goes into the upper reaches of the story did us wrong, and the acting really nailed it, like twisted that knife. So I'm gonna say Reply 1994 goes into our maximum emotional damage. I'll never recover. And part of that also is the fandom experience of just being pit against each other. And I don't know, I don't like it when we fight, guys. It's just really hard. And it's just a drama. Like, I know that we all care very much, but at the end of the day, it's just a drama, and it was not the most pretty fan experience. Okay, let's move on to something a little less angsty. Extraordinary You. So Extraordinary You is Jae-wook playing Taecyeon, and he's going up against our main lead Haru, played by Roun, and they are vying for the affections of Kim Hae-yoon, Eun-dano. So Jae-wook definitely is on this list for his acting. I don't think the story primed him to be a real contender. It's truly the way that he acted him with much more, I think, emotional complexity than was on the page. So Lee-jae-wook's character and Kim Hae-yoon's character, when they're both like asleep, or when they're both in the comic book, and they're just kind of like puppets on a string, acting out the writer's written like story, I think, he's the kind of like slightly gruff, not really sweet, like boyfriend by necessity. Like the writer wrote him to be them to be a couple, but he's not like in love with her. She has that, you know, puppy dog adoration for him, but he's kind of like whatever, not that interested. When they both wake up and they both discover free will-ish, you know, they have their own thoughts and feelings outside of the drama world or the comic book world, is when things get a little interesting, because now they get to like deviate from the way that they're written. So Haru is our actual male lead, and the reason he works is because he's actually not bound by the comic book character. Like he's kind of a blank page character, and then when he wakes up and gains, you know, they call it self-awareness in the show, he's almost like a free agent with his feelings, because he's not bound by the strictures of like this character, because he wasn't really written that tightly. And so when he and our main character Kim Hae-in are falling for each other, Lee-jeok's character doesn't really care for much of the show until he starts to wake up and starts to feel like he has a different side to him than the written character. But he has no shot. And so I think this one this second lead syndrome is here to show us free will, because there's actually a moment where he is trying to get her to like him back. She has her feelings for Haru, they're well established, and she has no other interest, no eyes for anyone other than Haru. But he's trying to win her over, sort of. He's trying to convince her like that he's an option, and she keeps resisting. She's not into it. And there's a moment where her character kind of gets reset. It's kind of like an amnesia trope where she suddenly loses all of her memories of Haru and is now back to like the baseline of being obsessed with him. And he knows that's not her, and he's not satisfied, because that's not the Tano that he wants, right? That's the Tano who's just a puppet on a string saying the words that the writer has given her. And he's like, that's not what I meant. So ultimately, I think this one shows us that, you know, it's better to have somebody who loves you for you than somebody who's like written on the page to love you. So I want to say this one, it is a love triangle. It's not a love triangle. And I also don't think it's cute. Yeah, I don't think it's cute. So I'm going to put Extraordinary You into it hurt, but I respect the OTP. Ultimately, it's more angsty than cute, and it wasn't major trauma, because I totally understand why he was in the story and why he didn't end up realizing his love, and I respect it, but I did feel bad for him. So next is My Love from the Star. Okay, I think this is like a pretty simple one, because Park Hae-jin's character in My Love from the Star is the best friend of our main character, Chun Sung-hee, played by Chun Ji-hyun. So he is kind of like, I think he, Chun Ji-hyun, and Yoo In-na's character, they're like the trio of friends from childhood, growing up together. And so he's always had eyes for her, for Chun Ji-hyun, and she's just always thought of him as just like her platonic best friend. And then the main character is played by Kim Si-hyun, playing Do Min-jun, and he's our alien who comes down to Earth and gets stranded there, and cue massive, you know, epic romance. So I think that romance was crackling and sparkling and had so much chemistry, and Park Hae-jin was absolutely there. He was there. I think the reason he's here at all is because he was offered as a counterpoint, kind of like on the paper, he's like the boring, safe, reasonable, like he only wants good things for our main character. And our Do Min-jun lead character, he needs to go back to his home planet because Earth is not, like his constitution does not agree with Earth. And so he needs to go back home to his star. And so he's not a viable long-term partner option. And so I think he's like technically there to be like, see, you could have safety. Isn't that an option? And it is an option. But I think if anything, he was more there for the BFF drama, but with the three friends, than as like a real romantic counterpart. But I like having him sort of remind us of the extremes of what can happen when there's just like no compelling reason to root for this guy or to feel pain for it. So I am thankful for that. He didn't hurt. And so I'm gonna say was this even a love triangle? Because it barely was. My Girl. My Girl is the next one, and Lee Jun-gi. Okay, so I know that this one's an old drama, and I don't know how many people who are drama fans now will have seen this, but it's definitely one of the first like really like strong second lead syndromes I remember. Definitely we had them before, but I remember him having like a whole faction. Like I think the Lee Jun-gi sort of like Justice for Lee Jun-gi faction was definitely there. Although I do think that the main couple was very cute and very well liked. It wasn't like it was controversial by any means. It's just Lee Jun-gi was very committed in this role. So Lee Jun-gi plays Jong-ho, who is romantically the rival to Lee Dong-wook, and then they are vying for the affections of Lee Da-hae. Okay, the setup of this is Lee Dong-wook sort of hires her or brings her on to impersonate his long-lost cousin. And there are reasons, and they sort of make sense. And because of the setup, they obviously can't be together, because if she's actually going to be, you know, in the family as a cousin, then either they have to out themselves as big old liars, or she's forever his cousin and they have to accept that. So I think at that stage of the romance, when you're like, oh, like this is not actually viable, then he's actually a really good option for you, because he's, you know, he's sweet and he's thoughtful and he loves you. And I'm sure that's when a lot of friends were like, oh, like that guy, he's standing right there. And I think he's also very honest about his feelings and liking her, and that there's something really compelling about that. Ultimately, I think he gets friend-zoned. I think he's the friend-zoned version of the second lead, and in that sense, I don't know that she ever saw him in a way that was anything beyond the friend zone. So the pain of the second lead syndrome is more like our secondhand pain for him, of like, oh, you're not gonna get what you want. That's sad. And I think Lee Jun-gi too, very early in his career, was like really intensely like committed in this role. And like I remember like the way he would cry and the way he would just really act and almost overact, I would say. Like he had a tendency to just like get so into the role that sometimes I'd be like, whoa, that's pretty intense. And so I think that also, you know, made us feel for him. So I will say I personally was team OTP on this one, because I just, you know, I was there for the main couple. But I think, you know, Lee Jun-gi made a good case for himself. It was not cute. I think it's one cut above cute. So therefore I'm going to put it into it hurt, but I respect the OTP. Okay. Go back couple. Oh, go back couple. Okay. This one is Kang-joon as the second lead, and he is going up against Seon-ho and vying for the affections of Jang-nara. So in this story, the setup is Jang-nara and Seon-ho are a married couple in the present day. So let's say like they're 38 years old, and their marriage has gone down the tubes and at the absolute bottom, and they get a divorce. And then through a magical twist of magic, they get transported back into when they're around 20 in college, because they have just gone through a really painful breakup and divorce, and it's very acrimonious. When they're back in college, they both decide kind of independently, like, I'm going to change my life. I'm not going to get with this person. I'm going to take it in a different direction, and maybe that means my life will end up better. And Kang-joon in their college days is her 선배, so he's a little bit older, and when she thinks back in time, he was interested in her, but she rebuffed him for some silly reason. And then later in life, she realized, or it was outed, that he was some very rich person's son. And she's always been like, kind of facetiously like, oh, I should have picked that one. And so in this time, when she goes back, she has the opportunity to actually pursue that relationship. And he is, you know, in this do-over version, when she actually does go out with him and she does sort of get to know him, he's just adorable. And it's interesting because like he's older than her in the past, but she has the mindset of like a 38-year-old ajumma. So to me, he's like a young puppy boy with an older woman, even though their ages are actually reversed. I think structurally this one really works like, and what I mean by works is like really drives that knife into our sides, because he is giving her literally a second chance to do her life over. And not only is it a different option than the one that made her so unhappy and like such a bitter end to their relationship, that when she has a chance to pursue something, and he's very sweet and he's devoted to her and just like smitten in a very cute way, that you see that that's like the life that could have been, right? Like the road not taken. And so it's actually like a really compelling, like, ooh, take that door. But ultimately what happens is, even though she and her husband or ex-husband, even though she and Seon-ho are trying not to get back together, or trying to like maintain their distance and live their own lives, they do keep getting sucked into each other's circles, because, you know, they're at the same college, and seeing things that they hadn't seen the first time around, it gives them extra insight into their relationship, and it almost like makes her fall in love with him again, or reinforces the bond that they thought that they had broken. And so when she chooses that husband again over this devoted, like perfect option, then you're like, oh, well, like I guess it's love, because she had that option and she decided not to take it. So it's choice. So this one, it hurt me because I wanted her to pick Ki-yong, because I wanted her to have a better life, because I think that Seon-ho was kind of really good at playing a bastard, and so I never wanted her to get back with him, but I also understood the story leading me to that place. It's just that I didn't want to go back there. Like, why did you make me go back there? So I think I'm gonna put this one, is it major trauma? No, I guess it wasn't major enough to be major trauma, so I'm gonna say it hurt. I respect the OTP, I guess. Yeah, okay, we'll move on. All right, next we have Hwarang. Okay, if I put it on my mental map, I'm gonna say more acting than story, but maybe like not all the way on the acting. I think I wanna say like kind of in the middle. So this one is Hyung-sik playing opposite Park Seo-joon, and the love interest is Ko-ara. And this is, back in the day, it's a historical, I guess historical is kind of a stretch, period piece taking place in the Silla dynasty times. So I think we have to do a little bit of setup to kind of situate where these relationships intersect. And Park Hyung-sik plays a disguised king, a king in disguise. Basically a king who's trying not to act like a king, and for political reasons, it doesn't really matter. And Park Seo-joon plays like a no-name, like literally his name Mumyeong means no name, who kind of came from nothing, and they both end up in this Hwarang unit. And Hwarang historically was like a real unit of flower boy soldiers. And so in this drama, you have a bunch of young, up-and-coming, I don't know if they're all aristocratic young men, but they're all forming this new military unit and training together and bonding. And so I think the brotherhood story is really the backbone, and Park Hyung-sik and Park Seo-joon are both in the Hwarang together, so they have this sort of bond, and they both exhibit leadership qualities, which of course later is going to kind of play a foil, because they both become true contenders for the throne. And Ko-ara is caught between them. I don't know if she ever had feelings for Park Hyung-sik's character, but his feelings for her were strong. And the actual blocker was Park Seo-joon and Ko-ara. Their feelings for each other are definitely there, but there's a misunderstanding / secret that makes them think they might be siblings, is it? I think. And so of course, like, that can't happen. So I think it's in light of that, in light of like the OTP not being potentially viable, you're like, well, there is this other option, but I don't know that it was really like a true option. I think it was more a test of their brotherhood later, and having this woman come between them, it was a function of the ways in which they were rivals and less about the actual love itself. So I think, you know, at the end of the day, one gets the girl and the other gets the crown, so we're all happy maybe. I don't feel too badly for Park Hyung-sik. I think there was a moment where I think I felt bad that he was alone, because it's sad if you lose both your best friend and the girl. So Hwarang is gonna go, I think, a respectful amount of second lead syndrome. Next is Who Are You? School 2015. This one is Yook Sung-jae. His second lead syndrome goes up against Nam Joo-hyuk, and the girl in the middle is Kim So-hyun. Okay, I'm gonna take a moment here because I think this one was painful for maybe a non-obvious reason, and it's more structural than it is about the feelings, although it is also about the feelings. So this drama has Kim So-hyun playing twins, and they're twins who like don't know about each other, and there's also amnesia in play. So okay, Kim So-hyun plays one twin who doesn't know she has a twin, and she gets amnesia through an accident, and when she wakes up she is in her sister's life, but she doesn't know that because she has amnesia. And so she is introduced into this new world, not knowing it's new because everything's new. And so in this new world, Nam Joo-hyuk plays her sister's like kind of buddy who has feelings for her, and he's like almost get ready to confess, kind of like take their friendship to the next level kind of thing. So Yook Sung-jae and her sister didn't really have a relationship. He's kind of a loner. And so when Kim So-hyun comes in, and she is really only able to be herself around him because that's the person they don't have history with. And so she doesn't have to like feel bad that she doesn't remember him or act a certain way around him. And also when she recovers her memory and realizes that she's not in the right life, and like is kind of conflicted about like, do I tell, do I not tell, because like she thinks that her sister actually died, and so she's like trapped in this life now. Yook Sung-jae's character is the only one who finds out who she really is. So truly, she's the only one she can truly be herself around, whereas she's pretending with everyone around her. So when Nam Joo-hyuk is chasing after her, she does sort of have feelings for him, but then it's all murky because she thinks that he's not into her, he's into her sister. So she's kind of competing with the memories of her dead sister that he doesn't know is her dead sister. In this scenario, like you have one boy who likes her for being her sister, and then the other boy who likes her for being her. And also then the sister, her twin, Kim So-hyun again, comes back because she's not actually dead. And you're like, yay, you get the two couples. Like, this is great. Except instead, the sister leaves, and then Kim So-hyun picks Nam Joo-hyuk, and Yook Sung-jae is left on the side, and I'm like, what? And I understand that if Kim So-hyun has feelings for him, she has feelings for him. And this second lead syndrome is here to tell you that it's the girl's choice that matters, not the guy's. And sure, I'm all for that. It didn't do enough to resolve the whole, like, do you like her for her, or do you like her for all of the like overlapping feelings of what you had for her sister? They're different people. Meanwhile, you have this guy who sees you for you, who you can be yourself around, and yet you picked that guy. So I'm kind of still mad about it. I don't know that I would say it's like maximum emotional damage, but I still feel like that pinch. And this one is definitely a writing fail for me, because the acting, he was charming, he was brooding and then sweet. And I think that means, do I put you under major trauma? I think I do, because although I understand like the mechanics of what you did on the, no, I don't. I don't understand the mechanics. I was gonna say, because even if I understood that, what I didn't like was that it misled us into thinking that Yook Sung-jae was the more viable option. I think you gave him all of those beats and then you didn't give me the payoff. Also too, the two actors, Nam Joo-hyuk and Yook Sung-jae. Nam Joo-hyuk was maybe a little bit more like well-known, but they were presented, like they were very, very early in their careers, and so I think it was credible to believe either of them would have been the lead. It wasn't like a super obvious, like, oh, well, one was way famous, so of course he was the male lead. So I think the structure of the show really misdirected us in a way that like wasn't good. So I'm gonna say that Who Are You? School 2015 goes into major trauma, but I've healed, but reluctantly. Okay, Dream High. So this one is Taecyeon as the second lead, and he's going up against Kim Soo-hyun, and they're vying for the affections of Suzy. And I almost didn't put this one here until I was kind of like refreshing my memory about the setup of the show, and then I realized, oh, Taec and Suzy are actually early in the drama, like they do like each other. And so it's an interesting case where it's not like the second lead had no shot and he was just kind of one-sidedly longing after her. No, they had reciprocated feelings, and I think they even had a kiss. I might have to check that one again. So they actually have that trajectory early on. What happens to break them apart is actually narratively useful. They're all at like an idol prep high school, basically. And you have basically the underdog team, which is our main characters, and then you have like the kind of like the hot shots, the ones that were gonna make it, the front runners. So Taec is one of them, but there's a moment where he swaps and he joins the upper team. And after that, it becomes a full-on rivalry, not only just in a romantic sense. I think actually romantic is like the least of the senses I'm talking about, but it sets up that dynamic where you have like, it's like the haves and the have-nots, and you're really rooting for the underdog team to really come together and prove themselves. And so it's not that you're rooting against Taec and his team, but they're gonna be fine. He didn't sell Suzy out so that he could advance, but it almost has that mirroring effect. Because he made that choice, it puts them at an impasse. It's almost like an integrity issue for her. So she's like, okay, and she distances herself from Taec after that point. So it almost doesn't matter what his feelings are because he chose the other path. On the pain scale, I'm gonna say it's kind of low. I don't think it's something he's fighting for, and he's not pursuing it at a certain point. So at that point, I think he really becomes more effective as like the foil to the underdog team than as a romantic option. So I'm gonna say, was this even a love triangle? You know, it was. So I'm gonna put that in the too cute to break me, because there are moments where he and Kim Soo-hyun's character have like this really cute romancy dynamic going on, like, you know, jokes about wearing each other's underwear and kind of things like that. So I don't know that the second lead romance was too cute, but I think like the overall dynamic was more cute than trauma. So what's next? Let's see. Oh my god, Startup. Okay, I think we all need to collectively sit back and take a breather before Startup, because wow, this one hurt. This one was Kim Seon-ho playing Han Ji-pyong, and he was going up against Nam Ju-hyuk as Nam Do-san, and they're vying for the affections of Suzy. So this one was massively painful for, I want to say, most of us. And I think that even if you were not on team second lead, you had to have seen the pain. Yeah, I think you had to understand the pain that we were going through, because this drama almost like, what is it? It flouted conventions. It took the familiar K-drama conventions and it used them against us. Basically, you gave the first episode, the first introductory episode, which was really like sweet and lovely, and you devoted it to Han Ji-pyong, or Kim Seon-ho's character, and you did it in his childhood, and you gave him that early childhood sob story and set him up in a really beautiful way and gave him such a lovely tie to the grandma character. Like, he's the lost orphan who has nobody to rely on and is at the bottom of his luck, and grandma takes him under her wing, and they have this very gruff bond that develops. All of that emotional setup and sort of development of his character is prime K-drama lead material. And to even worse than that is you gave him the namdarim treatment, okay? And if you don't know what the namdarim treatment is, well, Well, I just made that up. But basically, Namdarim is a young up-and-coming star who was basically for, I mean, a whole decade, the child star, playing the younger actor versions to whoever the main A-lister was. Every generation or so, you'll have like these really talented, charismatic young child actors who you see in every drama ever because they're so good at it. So they almost become shorthand for this is our main lead character. So Namdarim, he is now, I think, in his early 20s, so he's graduating into actual leading roles where he's playing like his own characters. But for a whole stretch when he was playing the younger versions of characters, he played the younger versions of people like Lee Dong-wook, Kang Dong-won, Yoo Yeon-seok, Im Si-won, Jun-ho, Jang Ki-yong, Jung Hae-in, Ji Chang-wook, Sung-jae, Lee Jong-seok 3 times. Okay, and also, let me put it this way. Lee Jong-seok, he played the younger part in 3 different instances, and the latter 2 instances were dramas written by the writer of Startup. This is his 3rd time playing a child counterpart in the Startup writer's oeuvre. And so of course you're like, oh, this is the Namdarim character. Of course he's our main star. And then the moment that you see that he grows up into Kim Seon-ho, and you're like, wait, what? Like, that's not our lead. And here's the thing. If you're maybe not familiar with K-drama, like casting and industry, whatever, then you were oblivious to this and sucked into the trap. And I feel for you because that was a much painfuler fall to have discovered that later. If you were following the K-drama, sort of, you knew that Nam Joo-hyuk was the main lead, right? He had the posters, he had like the top billing, and you knew, even if you hadn't seen the show yet, you just knew he was going to be the lead. So you're like, oh no, I am on the wrong ship. And I remember after I watched episode 1, I texted like my group chat, my K-drama group chat, and I was like, you guys, I'm on the wrong ship. And I think I'm gonna be here till the bitter end. Like, I think I'm gonna go down with this ship. Because this is one where like I knew it was the wrong ship, but it was done so well that I was willing to go there with it. Like, it had me emotionally, and so I was like, oh, because, you know, in the childhood characters, in the childhood portions, you have Kim Seon-ho's younger character being pen pals with Susie's younger character. And granted, it's under false pretenses, right? He's using a different person's name, so understandably, like, it's not like a pure like love letter situation going on, at least not on his side. But you're waiting for the payoff of when they meet as adults and then they get to reunite. And you're like, oh no, I see what you're doing. And it's like, I see the train, and I guess I'm just gonna stand here and let it hit me because I can't get off this track. But maybe you were the other person who, maybe you were early in your K-drama experience when you saw Startup, so you didn't know that it had all of these signs. And so you're the person standing with your back to the train, waiting for it to hit you, not knowing when that was gonna happen. And I'm sorry for your loss, because I think that would have been really painful to have thought that it was gonna go one way, for it to veer off course and do the other. To be fair, I think there is an argument for the OTP. And honestly, by the end of the drama, I was fine with the OTP. I had nothing against them. I think the way that the story was written, I didn't think it was wrong. I was like, no, that makes sense. They should belong together. It's fine. But it was like you started off on the wrong foot, because you got us so emotionally invested that you couldn't like undo it and be like, oh no, transfer all of that affection this way instead. I think if you want to, you know, dig into signs for the OTP instead, you had Kim Seon-ho's character, like, he realizes his feelings late. So it's not like he knew what they were and had to just sit on the side and be rebuffed. He was slow to see Tae-mi, Susie's character, as a love interest, and by the time that he knew that he had feelings for her, she was already engaged elsewhere. Whereas if you look at Nam Joo-hyuk's character, To-san, he saw her value immediately. He was into her. I think I give a lot of props for somebody who doesn't try to confuse himself, and just kind of is true to his own feelings. Where you see Ji-pyong, Kim Seon-ho's character, going through a lot of mental tricks to deny his feelings and to be like, oh, I don't need her, I don't really like her. And then when he has to finally acknowledge his feelings, he's like stuck, which I think as a character arc is actually much more effective. So if you're looking at Ji-pyong's second lead syndrome, I actually think it works really well to develop him as a character and give him his own personal arc, much more than it does to kind of give us that romantic love triangle tension, because we had too much of that. Because I think Ji-pyong's arc is that he thinks he needs nobody. He grew up orphaned, he had nobody to rely on, and he had to grow a tough outer shell and be completely independent and earn his success that way. And I think his shell grew so thick that he wouldn't let anybody in. And his feelings for Taemi really push him outside of that shell and force him to realize that, oh no, I don't actually want to be completely alone. And it's okay to want other people around you. It's okay to have relationships. And so I think that pushing him out and forcing him to make that kind of realization in his character was really good for him. So in that sense, the writing made sense for him as a character. As a second lead though, oh man, that was hard. I think, you can't really recover. It's like, so when you have too much of a good thing, is it actually a bad thing? Because would I have wanted him to be less effective in the beginning just so that it hurt us less? I don't think so. I think I'll happily take the pain on this one. It's just I still feel it. And, I was rewatching some parts of this drama while I was looking up stuff for this, and it's a good drama, and I think I will rewatch it fully, even knowing that the train is going to hit me again, because overall it was well done, it was well written, the characters are great, and it justified where it went with that. I think it just over calibrated the first step. It's unfortunately like too much of a good thing in the beginning. So I'm gonna have to put Startup at maximum emotional damage because I got hit by a train. Okay, all right, While You Were Sleeping. Oh, okay, so we were just talking about Startup. Same writer who wrote While You Were Sleeping a few years before that. And in this drama, the second lead is Hae-in, and he's going up against Lee Jong-seok. And oh, it's Susie again. Wait, did we have 3 Susies in a row? Sorry, I did not do that on purpose. Despite all of the connections to Startup, I think this one was a lot less painful for me, where Hae-in was a great second lead. He was presented as a really, I don't know if he was a viable contender, but as a really solid option. And he had all of the charm, and also he had a really great bromance kind of set up with Lee Jong-seok. Basically, the 3 of them as friends also developed on the same course as his feelings for Susie grew. And in this one, I think, for me at least, the main OTP, that was where all of my feelings were attached. So Hae-in was more like, oh, I'm sorry for the pain you're about to feel, because you're going to be disappointed. The main couple is strong, and I don't think you have any space to insert yourself. And to his own credit, I think he recognizes that and kind of removes himself. So he might have, for a brief moment, entertained the possibility of putting himself up as a contender. But I think as soon as he saw how serious that the main couple were, he, I think, valued the friendship more. And even at a point where they kind of acknowledged that it's a little awkward because he expressed his feelings and was rebuffed, and he's still in the friend group, he was gracious enough to play it off and not let that ruin the friendship too, because it could have gone either way, right? It could have been awkward on either side, and he rolled with it. So I think in that sense, the romance, it was not super intense, but it was very steadfast. I think he was bummed about it, but he's gonna go on. He's gonna be fine, and I didn't really worry about him, the future him, when the drama ends. So I'm gonna say that, are you too cute to break me, or are you, I respect the OTP? I'm gonna say you're too cute to break me, just because any pain that you felt, it was like a stubbing of the toe pain. It wasn't like a shot to the heart. So He's gonna be fine, guys. Okay, romance as a bonus book. Lee Jong-seok again. Interesting. I don't know what I was thinking when I put these in this order, but also like Lee Jong-seok and Suzy are in a lot of dramas, and a lot of them are in traditional rom-com territory, so maybe they're just gonna have a lot of overlap. So romance as a bonus book is Ha-jun, and he is going up against Lee Jong-seok, and they are fighting for the affection of In-young. And this is like a Nuna romance drama where Lee Jong-seok has had lifelong feelings for her, but she has been married, or he knew her before she was married. So like, he knew when she started dating her boyfriend, and then got married, and she's been in a like bad marriage, and finally is coming out of it. So Ha-jun is, I think, a neighbor slash, somebody they start to work with at the publishing house where they all work. And he's like a very nice, cute, charming option. And I think there's enough of a space for him to think that he can kind of step forward and court her, because Lee Jong-seok and In-young's relationship is a little bit like blurry. They're so familiar with each other, but they're like not immediately romantic. If they're not already a couple, then maybe there's hope for the new guy. I think the moment that the couple solidifies, you're like, okay, well, it's over. Like, he doesn't even need to be here anymore. So for romance as a bonus book, I'm gonna say, was this even a love triangle? Or was he a dude standing over there with his feelings? All right, we're going a little bit further back for Song Kyung-kwan's scandal. This one is Yoo In, and he is playing counterpart to Yoo Chun, and they are vying for the affections of Park Min-young. So this one is a historical one. Park Min-young is in disguise as a male scholar, because women couldn't be scholars at the time, so they actually all end up in the same cohort at the school. And Yoo In's character actually, I think, is the first to realize that she is a girl. Yoo Chun doesn't discover for quite a while, but Yoo In clocks it pretty early, and so that triggers a lot of that like protectiveness. But he's a very stoic and like quietly helpful person. She will remain oblivious, but then he kind of appoints himself secretly as her protector. This character was so popular. So every character had like a nickname. They had a real name and a nickname, and his nickname was Koro, and they started calling it a Koro syndrome. Like, everybody was so in love with Koro and felt the Koro syndrome, which was synonymous with second lead syndrome. And I think he had so many instances where he was just like intensely broody and caring for her, but in an uncelebrated way that we're just like, oh my God, like she doesn't even know. And I think that was really powerful. Of course, I did feel like the main couple, I felt like it was set up well. I felt like they were truly an intellectual match. They respected each other, and they saw eye to eye on so many things in like this elevated sort of way. No question, that was the right romance. And I don't know if she ever saw Koro in that way. But I think the rivalry was really sharpened by the fact that they were also like political rivals. Yoo In's character is a Soron, and Yoo Chun's character is a Noron. And so basically all you need to know is that they're extreme opposite ends, like old school, new school. You have this like idealistic counter that put them completely at odds. And also like they work through that. So there's a brotherhood that arises out of this that both like sharpens the love triangle, but then it also becomes its own thing. And of course you have a fourth character, Jung-gi. They were a foursome there. And I mean, I don't know if it's like a consolation prize, but Jung-gi and Yoo In are sort of like, okay, they're not romantically paired, but they did win like the best couple award at the year-end drama awards ceremony, and I think they were the first male-male couple to win best couple. This was not actually a romantic pairing. It was definitely homoerotic, but it was homoerotic in the way that you do it for like with a wink and a nod, just to play up that cheekiness. Not to say anything transformative. They were not portrayed as queer in any way. They did have the queer question come up with the other storyline where Yoo Chun starts to fall for Park Min-young thinking she's a man, but I think that was a separate question. Yoo In on the spectrum, I think, would be far on the actor performance side of things, but on the story front, maybe just like kind of mid level, because I don't think they ever made it a case for him wanting to have a future with her. It was just up to the feelings part of things. So I'm gonna say 성균관 scandal, I'm gonna put you in, it did hurt, but I respect the OTP. Okay, got a couple more left to go, so let's try to get through these. Love Alarm. You know, Love Alarm, I thought it was like kind of mildly painful when I remembered it, but when I started looking back at the episodes, I realized it was more painful than I remembered, because they build it up in a structural way to be painful. And if you are like really invested in these characters, the plot is the one twisting the knife in our gut. And so this is Hwang, and he is the second lead next to Jong-garam, and they are vying for Kim So-yeon's affections. And this one is one of those shows where you're not even sure who the second lead is until at a certain point. So in the beginning, he and Kim So-yeon actually confirm their feelings for each other. So they like each other and they are together. So they're dating. So it's not immediately clear that he's going to end up the second lead. And also, like, side controversy is this was based on a webtoon, but the webtoon wasn't finished yet. And so the drama actually had the first ending, which was Jong-garam. And then the webtoon finished its ending, and it also reinforced Jong-garam. And then a little bit later, the writer of the webtoon actually put forth like a, not like a director's cut, but like an extended ending sort of edition. But she basically rewrote the plot and made Song-gang the end game, which is one, really confusing, because no matter which ship you're on, you're confused. Did you completely negate all of the work that you put in before to make it this other ending? Or like, okay, you gave us what we wanted, but not like that. Like, I think there was nobody who was happy with that ending. So I think that also contributes to some of these lingering feelings of hurt. But it's also just because they weren't clear intentionally who was going to be the end game. It was almost like a who's the husband game, except without any of the fun. Just to give a little bit of setup, in this world there is a phone app that everybody can download. It will ring if anybody within a 10-meter radius of you likes you. So it's sort of like a litmus test of whether young people like each other, and it kind of takes the whole country by storm. And because the love alarm is telling you how you feel, granted you are feeling these things, it's not making up feelings for you, but it's an interesting like dystopian sort of twist, because people start to almost rely on the love alarm more than their own intrinsic feelings. I think the philosophical argument of the show I really liked. Because basically it's highlighting for us that love is ultimately a choice. It's not a foregone conclusion. Also, love isn't always enough, because so Kim So-yeon's character, even though she and Song-gang are together, I think a lot of things lead her to decide to break up with him. She has a lot of unresolved trauma. She's has a lot of abandonment issues. People are terrible to her. She's being bullied. Her family sucks. And he loves her and he's very sweet to her, but he doesn't really understand, because he's a young, popular, beloved person, and the only way for her to break up with him while she still loves him is to lie to him. And so, I mean, plot tricks, whatever. So that's a forced breakup. And in the interim, I think the way that she approaches the Jong-garam romance is actually very natural. Jong-garam understands that she doesn't have feelings for him. And he's like, you know what? It's okay. To me, just being with you is enough. Like, I just want to be a part of this story. He saw how she had to lie to his friend, Song-gang, to get him to accept her decision. And so he's like, you know, I accept your feelings. All I ask is that you don't lie to me about them. Just tell me how you feel, and I accept that. So if that means she doesn't like him back romantically, that's okay. And so they develop this very natural, like, friendship that, like, it just turns into more, until there's one point where she realizes, oh wait, do I like him? Like, she doesn't know, and she doesn't have this love alarm to tell her because plot reasons. And so when they take the love alarm out of the picture, she actually has to introspect a little and realize for herself. So I do find myself very on board with the story as it is, but because of that, like, murkiness of who was that, the end game, and kind of misdirecting us and giving Song-gang a really prominent early storyline and giving him so many of the earlier cute scenes. They front-loaded a lot of his character, and so they got us to really, you know, be on his side. And then I think as the tide started to turn, intellectually, I was with the drama. But I could totally understand if people felt really burned by being on the wrong ship with Song-gang. So I want to say I don't personally have ill will toward this. I'm not going to say it's like the maximum emotional damage, but I do think that it was a pretty major trauma for many people. She was pretty. All right, let's do She Was Pretty next. Okay, this one is Siwon, and the main lead was played by Park Seo-joon, and the woman in the center was Hwang Jung-eun. I think one's pain level for this drama probably depends on how much you bought into the main pairing. I think that will really ultimately alter how you feel about Siwon's character, who I think we can all agree that he was acted well. This was Siwon being his most compelling, I want to say, like very charismatic, very complex and layered. And so even when he's being joking, you could see all of the things underneath that he was suppressing, and he showed a lot of range. Park Seo-joon okay, just to explain where I netted out on this is Park Seo-joon for me didn't work. If you liked Park Seo-joon and where he and Hwang Jung-eun took their romance, I think, you know, not so much of a painful second lead experience. For me, I kind of hated Park Seo-joon. For me, I feel like Park Seo-joon's character started off so negatively that I never really fully recovered. You know, a lot of dramas have like the cold, arrogant male lead come in, and then over the course of the drama, he will soften, he'll fall in love, he'll learn how to be a better person, all of those things. In the beginning, when Park Seo-joon is played kind of like an asshole, I kind of expected that, it's fine, but there are certain things that I think he took it too far. Well, I think with the setup of Hwang Jung-eun's character not being pretty, that just left an extra bad taste in my mouth that was different from somebody just being like really arrogant or really demanding. So when he was really dismissive of her, and you know, in the very beginning she is like frizzy hair and has like acne and red skin and doesn't wear makeup and doesn't really put a lot of thought into how she dresses. The disdain that he shows her is so actually strong that I felt like it transcended the character, and I was like, ooh, I don't know, like I don't like those vibes from him. And the setup is that when they were younger, she was the young, pretty, popular one, and he was kind of like dorky, glasses, overweight, awkward. She was just really, really sweet. Didn't make anything of his appearance, and they bonded. He moved away, and so they haven't been in touch, but they both remember each other fondly. She's eager to meet him again, but then realizes that her current appearance, like she was pretty, but no, now she's no longer pretty. Will he be disappointed to see her? And she has insecurity about that, so she kind of chickens out and sends her beautiful best friend in her place to play herself. When he meets our heroine, he, you know, obviously thinks it's somebody else, and he's like, you don't even deserve the name that you have. Like, I can't accept that somebody with your face has the name of somebody so dear to me. And I think that, like, oh, after that, he was dead to me. So I could never really recover, and therefore when Siwon comes on, and he is lovely, and he sees her for who she is, and he's weird, like he's quirky and weird, and he like he prefers her frizzy hair. He's the only person where when she gets a makeover and, you know, like gets all pretty, he's horrified, and that endeared him to me so much, because he was like, no, you've lost all your charm. Oh no, now you're just normal. I think the downside of his second lead syndrome is that I don't think he had a chance. I think he was always a good friend to her, and so all of his feelings were definitely one-sided, and he always saw her with that through that lens of just longing and but like suppressed, because he covered everything up with a jokey smile, and he like wouldn't really let the truth stand for too long, because he, I don't know if it's like a defense mechanism or something, but she never really caught on to that. But I felt like he was just a better person. It wasn't even like he's a better boyfriend. It was like he's a better guy. But I will also say that, you know, I think he was also maybe kind of too much of a jokester, and like he wasn't swoony toward her. So maybe it didn't hit the same for everybody. And if you loved Park Seo-joon's character, because he does, turn it around at some point, it's too late for me, but maybe it wasn't for everybody, then maybe Siwon was just another second lead for you. I'm gonna say it was more than cute, so I'm gonna say it hurt, but I respect the OTP. All right, getting down to it. Reply 1998. Oh, okay. So when I say second lead syndrome, I'm pretty sure that this is one of the ones that most people think of first. And this was probably one of the most painful and maybe one of the most virulent fandom experiences around second lead syndrome. So this one is the third installment of the Reply series. And by now, we had all lived through 1994. And when this one came around, we were all pretty sure that they were going to do the same thing. I think we knew what to expect with the Who's the Husband game. I have to say, when this drama first came out, I was so burned by 1994 that I refused to watch this. I did not see it for years. And it was sort of like a choice out of bitterness because I was so burned by 1994. And that was the one where I feel like we didn't know what was coming for us. And that was a bit of a, oh, you were really going to play us that hard? Okay. And so when this one came, I was like, you know what? I'm not even going to. I refuse to be toyed with. But it was kind of everywhere in the fandom, in the zeitgeist, in the mainstream media. You couldn't get away from it. So even though I wasn't watching the drama at the time concurrently, I feel like I went through all of the pains together because I knew what was going on. And so I remember just being very glad I was not immersing myself in that pain because, again, like not only was the story killing us, but the fandom was killing us from the inside. The setup here. Ryu Jun-yeol is our second lead, but we didn't know if he was the second lead, and I think the not knowing is one of the most painful places to be. And he was going up against Park Bo-gum, and they were vying for the affections of Lee. Ryu Jun-yeol's character is Jong-hwan, and Park Bo-gum's character is Taec, and the Taec versus Jong-hwan argument was so fierce. And I think what the drama did was it front-loaded the Jong-hwan scenes, and in the early days, it really focused on his side of the feelings. And so we didn't even see her reaction to a lot of these, and we definitely didn't get Taec's side either, but we were able to see Jong-hwan falling in that very adolescent way of he's keeping everything close to the vest and he's not telling anybody anything, but you can see it in the cracks, in the in-between moments, but nobody else can see it. We can see it because we have access to him, but nobody else. And I think they were really building him up as the obvious choice. And so I remember being like, you know what? I'm not on a ship because I'm not watching it, but I picked that one. He's the obvious ship. Chibongi and Oppa, they really tore me apart. And so I'm not even gonna try to be on the wrong ship. I'm gonna go for the obvious right ship, Jong-hwan. I think little did I know what I had put myself up for, because I could hear in the media too, when the tide started to change and start to swing toward the Taec side. And then I was like, uh-oh, what's happening, guys? Are you all okay over there? And no, people were not okay. Because structurally, I feel like this writer learned from the 94 and was like, I could make this, all of the ways I failed to make this extra painful, I have learned my tricks. And so I think one of the things she did was she withheld Deoksun's feelings from us as the viewers. Whereas I think in 94, once you saw Kwoara, once you saw how she felt, you were like, oh, okay. I think if she likes Oppa and if Oppa is her choice, then it's Oppa. In 1988, Hae's feelings, you don't even know, because you see hints of this and hints of that, and you she's definitely close to Taec, but then she has more of those fluttery, crushy moments with Jong-hwan, and so you're like, oh, okay, well, it could go either way, and then of course the plot is breadcrumbing us, right? So that every time you get a scene with Jong-hwan, you would counter later with a scene with Taec, and they were very similar, and you're like, which is which? clearly all of this being manipulating us in real time. And I think that's one of the things that I did not love about the experience, although because I watched the show later, I was able to appreciate it for the show that it was, because it didn't carry the connotations of what the experience was doing to me. Because I don't like being jerked around by a writer, even though I respect this writer, and this writer is so good at her craft that I can't be like too mad. But I did feel like sometimes the desire to trick the audience trumped the desire for a cohesive story. It doesn't mean that the whole drama wasn't cohesive. It meant that the misdirects, like you spent a lot of energy leading us down one path, which is the wrong path, just so that we would get a certain, distance on this ship before you yanked us back and sent us on this ship. And if you were just purely telling the story without playing the game, I don't think we would have spent so much time in either of those areas. And so I feel like that wasn't like pure storytelling. It was storytelling meant to troll us. And I don't want to sign myself up to be trolled. When I actually watched the drama like in full later, I actually feel I was more willing to be on Team Tech this time. Again, I don't know if it's because I knew, but I could see more things. The thing though is I see a lot of comments of people saying like, oh, well, if you are on Team Jong-won, then clearly you're blind because they had so many seeds for Team Tech early. But then I also think that you could have easily say the reverse. If it ended up that Jong-won was the husband, you could say, oh, I don't know how Team Tech was so delusional because they had so many signs for Jong-won early on. That was done on purpose. So that's something that we can say with the safety of hindsight. So when I finally did watch the show, because I knew where it was going to lead us, the things that frustrated me about Jong-won really frustrated me about Jong-won. And if you're watching in real time, I think if you're on Team Jong-won, yes, you're frustrated with him, but that hope carries you through. But later, when you know that he's not the end game, it was really frustrating. And I was like, oh my God, you're not even trying anymore. And if you're not going to try, then I can't root for you. And so I think he had main character setup, but not main character follow through. And ultimately, at the end of the day, it could also be because I saw it when I was older. And the older I get, the less patience I have with people for dithering. And Tech was true to his feelings, and he kind of just like pursued his truth, right? He was honest with himself, and he was not coy about it. Not that Jong-won was coy, but I think he valued what he wanted. Whereas Jong-won, I would think, was so assailed with doubt and insecurity and hesitation. And I think he even says that in the show, where that was where he lost his shot. So he's personally devastated when he walks away from his feelings, like when he walks away from even pursuing that relationship. You see him cry, you see how much it hurts him. But at the same time, because he didn't actually go there, he didn't give it a shot, I can't but think, well, you brought this upon yourself. And so if you bring pain upon yourself, like self-inflicted pain doesn't hit the same as when you did everything and it still didn't go your way. And so therefore, the pain was mixed with a lot of frustration and exasperation of like, just do it, when you have all of the potential, because he was a viable contender. There's the thing too, because Toksun did like him and she gave him openings. There were a couple of opportunities, and even when it was staring him in the face and she's almost like leading him to the right answer, he chickens out and he backs down, and then later is disappointed in himself for doing that. And so are we. So it was a really, I think, maybe one of the hardest experiences. I don't know if I'm gonna say, okay, it's maximum emotional damage for sure. I'll never recover. I don't know where it stacks up if you have to like put them next to each other. 94 was hard because it was more of a surprise, not a full surprise, but it was more like the first time that had happened. 88 was sort of like, I thought I learned my lesson, but I guess I didn't. Startup is hard because I saw it coming and I still went there. So it's really hard to kind of measure those pains against each other, but I guess it's not a contest. They're all at the top tier. So maybe we don't have to answer that question explicitly of which was the worst. And okay, we are now at our last entry, which is Love in the Moonlight. So another cross-dressing girl dressing as a boy gets close to another boy. Although I think there was less gender confusion about it because I think she was found out. So this one is Ki-yong as the best friend of our main lead, Park Bo-gum. So there is that tension, two best friends who like the same girl. And they do have some early moments where he sees Kim Yoo-jung as a woman. And so he knows her identity. And I think he's always seen her in that light. I don't think he was ever a viable option in the sense that she was going to see him in that way. But I think maybe the story might have had a little room because you're also like, how is the prince going to marry a commoner / fake eunuch? The seeming impossibility of the OTP might have seemed like there have been a little bit of room for Ki-yong to come in, but ultimately I think the story didn't really push it too hard. He was fine. Yeah, you know, I wouldn't say he's bottom tier. It was definitely enough to register, but I think it was not enough to break me. So I'm gonna put him down there in Too Cute to Break Me. Okay, so we made it through the end of the list, and hopefully that wasn't too painful for most of you. Some of it was actually a little bit more of a hit to the heart than I was expecting because I thought time and distance would have done the trick, but apparently all it takes is one rewatch to bring those feelings back. But I think really second lead syndrome is a thing we're never going to get away from because it's such a powerful dramatic device. It moves plot forward, not only with the characters, but also with kind of like sharpening conflicts, raising tensions, and enhancing some of the things that are outside of the romantic bounds too. So like if they're political rivals, it makes it even more of a contrast. But then it also, I think, is one of those emotionally gripping elements that it's like, yeah, it hurts, but sometimes we want that because isn't it better to feel the thing, to feel the pinch than to like not care at all? I think also even if you're there to support the OTP, showing us like the alternate version can be really helpful and effective because it can really just show you that, you know what, he's perfect and he's devoted and he only has eyes for you, but it's not enough. And you know why? It doesn't matter who should be the right choice. All that matters is who you do choose. I think sometimes that can be the most powerful confirmation and validation of an OTP than even just making the OTP strong in the first place, is to show what it's better than, what you gave up for that. All right, so we've talked enough about second lead syndrome and probably picked at our wounds enough. So let's let this one lie here. See you around for the next one.